that will recognize Miss Raymer, I believe is how you pronounce that. She has been appointed to join us, and I believe she's here today. And with that, I will open the meeting and get started here. So, Director Stevenson, we'll let you have the floor first. Appreciate your presence today and joining us, and hopefully giving us your direction of what you'd like to see us do. We continue to work towards building relationships between the regulated and the regulator community, finding common ground that we can benefit both parties and allow us to work better and build that relationship and that trust going forward with the large group that we have of very diverse individuals. So with that, the floor is yours.
Director Stevenson, before you get started, can I just go over a couple of housekeeping things?
Sure.
So just first of all, everybody should know that we're recording the session. So if you don't want to be seen, you'll need to turn your camera off. And then just a couple things about if you're a guest who's participating, we just ask that we treat this as much like a normal MAC meeting as possible. So if you want to address MAC, if you can either chat to us or just raise your hand if you're using Teams, then we'll recognize you and have you speak. And then when you're done, if you can just mute your microphone, that'd be great. If you're on the phone, you'll need to use *6 to mute and unmute yourself. And if you want to address MAC, you can send either Kevin or I an email. Our email addresses are in the agenda and mine is in the invite, and then we'll recognize you to speak as well. And that's all I had.
All right. Thanks, Ernie. Hi, Mike. It's nice to see you, albeit virtually. Nice to be here today. Nice to see, gosh, my team. I haven't seen my team in person for too long, so it's nice to see my crew here. I appreciate the time today, and I think I'm just going to do a quick check, Ernie. I think I have until 10:30. I know I have a hard stop then because of another meeting, but I'm happy to come back at any point in time. I think there's an interest in maybe engaging in a little bit more of a discussion, and I'm happy to do that if we have time today. But I just have really some introductory remarks, just kind of stream of consciousness stuff that I'll just share and again kind of open the floor. But first and foremost, I want to thank everyone for your involvement and for your participation and your engagement. I've heard a lot about this group from my team, very positive remarks about just your level of commitment, your leadership, your guidance, and your direction to us. So, in my mind, the concept of an advisory group is really important to what we do as an agency, kind of across the board in all different areas. So I really appreciate this group and the direction that you've provided, the fact that you kind of act as a sounding board for ideas that we have. It's extremely important. So again, I just want to thank you, tell you how much I appreciate that, and how much I look forward to just our continued partnership, because it really is about partnership and working together. We have common goals and objectives related to waste management, recycling, litter prevention across the board. So it's really important to me that we continue to work together and communicate. I'm not gonna bore you all with my story. A lot of you know me. I see some familiar faces. A lot of you have known me for a long, long time. So I won't necessarily take you on my journey, but for those of you who don't know me, I came from within the agency. I started out in the regulatory programs, so certainly understand that side of the house and the importance of that. But gradually worked my way, about halfway through my career, worked my way into more of a compliance assistance, business assistance, outreach. I went down that avenue because in my mind, personally, it just spoke to me. And I felt at that time, and I still feel today, that that's a very important part of what we do. Equally as important to our regulatory responsibilities is to be helpful and to provide assistance and tools and resources that communities and businesses and others need to be successful and to really grow. and thrive in Ohio. So I'm very wired towards compliance assistance, outreach, education, resources. And so obviously that's right in the wheelhouse of what we're talking about and really what my team is responsible for here, and just being helpful and being helpful to all of you and to communities and everyone in need. So that is my personal philosophy. I know my team here, they live that. But I just wanted to share that just because I think it's really a pillar of the agency and what we do. So when it comes to, strategic vision, I'm also very much goal oriented, and I believe in strategic planning and vision setting and working together to make sure we're all kind of in alignment, moving in the same direction. And again, I think there's a strong nexus to a lot of the hard work that you've all been undertaking and giving us guidance and direction on our solid waste management plan and strategic vision related to that. But I am as equally excited about the future and what we're going to be able to do and continue to focus on in terms of recycling, litter prevention, market development. So I want to talk a little bit about that. I think that this group has a strong interest in maybe giving me some feedback and sharing your observations on kind of the direction that we're going in with respect to our grant programs. I think we've got a solid foundation and a great track record and a great history of really supporting a lot of fantastic projects through, the leadership. I see Chet. I haven't seen Chet in a long time, but Chet, has been in at ground zero, and Ernie and the entire team just in providing support and direction related to what we're doing in the world of recycling. So, we've had some enhancements to the program itself. I know we had to hit the pause button in 2020, unfortunately, but I think, generally speaking, we're back on track with our grant programs, and I think the future looks very promising. I have a very strong interest in this particular area because of the things that I think we can accomplish together. So some exciting developments that I've seen in the program include focusing on schools and educational institutions. And that's kind of near and dear to my heart because I get the opportunity to go out and, well, I didn't in 2020, but before that, and hopefully at some point in the near future, interacting with students and being in the school environment. There are just so many benefits in supporting the activities that they're doing. And many of them are really kind of walking the walk, and they have sustainable practices and really innovative ideas. And so I see just a golden opportunity to not only acknowledge the efforts that we see in our schools, but also to connect with kids very, very early with the message of stewardship, recycling, litter prevention, and just more sustainable activity. So it's the sweet spot, in my opinion, when we can support not only what we're doing, but just support their overall vision and mission from an educational standpoint, and get these kids hooked very early on in understanding how important it is to, take good care of the resources that we have in front of us and just be good stewards and be sustainable. So I'm pretty excited about that. But overall, I think the program has been very solid for many, many years. I think it's focused in just the right directions. I think that market development is, I've always been very supportive of that because I think that, there's the economic development opportunities here. And, Ohio is and could be more of a leader in terms of promoting the technologies and just standing up the businesses in Ohio that can help us kind of move the needle on recycling with innovative technology. So strongly support that. I think there's more work to be done, obviously, in that area, but it's really important. And I think it's an emerging need for sure, just because, as you know, we have some materials that are can be rather tricky to try and recycle. So we have to figure out what are the technologies out there that are innovative and could help be part of the solution. So strongly support that. The only other thing that I might add, and Ernie, if you want me to talk about anything else, or anyone else from the team, if there's anything else you want me to elaborate on, I'm happy to do that. As people probably know, and again, there's a direct connection to what you're doing here, is we recently launched a statewide anti-littering campaign. And so certainly want to leverage our recycling dollars, litter prevention dollars, to support all of the efforts out there that have been ongoing in that arena. I just find it very interesting, to be honest, and a little sad that we are talking again about not littering. And it's just maybe my observation, but I think it's the observation of many others, that we have a pretty serious problem with litter in Ohio. You seem to see it everywhere. And it's just surprising to me that we seem to have come full circle, and now we're talking about it. And it's very much a focus of our efforts. We're working in partnership with Department of Natural Resources and ODOT to collaborate in partnership, and again, trying to reinforce strong messaging about alternatives to littering and more appropriate ways to manage waste, and see if we can kind of help get the word out and be supportive of all of you and be your partners in what seems to be kind of a re-emerging issue, I guess I'll say. So I wanted to highlight that if folks weren't aware. I think we're kind of in the early phase of launching that, but we look forward to again, getting out there and providing the leadership that we need to provide as agencies in this arena, and then just supporting all of the efforts across the board that are related to this, from communities to institutions to organizations that are focused on this too. So I'm going to pause there. That was kind of a long-winded intro and a few thoughts right out of the starting gate. I'll also maybe just comment on kind of as an agency overall, where we're at, what we're doing. I think we've had a very productive past year. It's been over a year, which is hard to believe, a year and a few months now that we've been kind of teleworking in the COVID environment, and very optimistic, I think, as many of you are, that we're coming out of that, and we'll be on the other side of that. So I very much look forward to the opportunity to interact with people face to face. I have attended a few meetings face to face, and am really energized about the possibility of getting back out there and actually seeing people and sitting down at the table with people. We are starting our gradual transition back into the office spaces beginning July. Again, it's going to be kind of a voluntary, first step in, kind of rotating cohorts, and we'll see how things unfold there. But I think we're at the ready. I think all agencies are kind of in alignment with transitioning back. We're on different timetables, but generally speaking, we're all kind of beginning the process here fairly soon. So, but I think we've been productive. We've gotten a lot accomplished. It's just been we've been innovative. So I think we've figured out ways to do business and transact with customers in a virtual environment, and have a lot of lessons learned, I think, coming out of that. And I think have developed tools that I think hopefully will sustain and use in the long run, just because of the efficiencies that they have, like Teams as an example. So I think there's a lot of opportunities to kind of capitalize on our experience and just be more efficient operating as an agency. So that's kind of the good stuff coming out of it. It has not been without its challenges, but I think we've done well, and looking forward to getting back to kind of our new normal, whatever that looks like, but we're beginning that process. So just wanted to give folks an update there in terms of kind of what our plan is, what we've been doing. And I will pause there. I see Vlad is with us. So Vlad, Ernie, chat team, is there anything else that you wanted me to talk about before we kind of open up the floor?
I don't. Just give members a chance to interact with you.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm sure they're much they'd much rather hear from you, Director, than me. So
That's not true, Vlad. Well, I also know this is not, I know that this is a very active, engaged group. So I'm happy to entertain questions, or, if you have thoughts on how you'd like to kind of further the dialogue with me, or things that you'd like to maybe talk about, in the future, maybe in more, when we have more time to do so. Again, happy to entertain thoughts, suggestions that you have, questions that you have as well.
Director Stevenson, I guess I'll start out here. Really appreciate your time and your comments today. I'm curious, and maybe we can try to figure out something on the litter prevention program, try to learn more about that and how we can be more beneficial to that program with our suggestions and things like that. I think that we have reached out and started working much more in depth on the grants program and things like that, trying to figure out how to help it be that much better than it already is. Trying to leverage the information that we have from Mr. Sargent and other people that deal in other states. How can we learn from that and make that program take pieces from other places and make it even better? So I think that's really all that we've been working on here currently. The state plan is the state plan, and we've kind of made some changes to that. Hopefully they're beneficial in a lot of ways. I think that most everything that we have worked on is kind of in line with what you're thinking. I know that we've had a lot of ideas, and hopefully maybe we can, as we go back into having common meetings and that kind of stuff, maybe we can bring you in for a brainstorming meeting here at the end of the year and kind of see where we've been and where we go. And that might be an opportunity for us to kind of expand even further what we've talked about. But I don't know if anybody else has any comments or questions, but I appreciate your time again.
Director Stevenson, Steve Sargent, good to see you. I just want to tell you, I appreciate what the EPA has done, and you kind of find yourself in a role of a clearinghouse sometimes. This recycling partnership effort that's underway to try to educate our communities, and it helps the whole industry. It's not just one vendor. It's the entire, as I call the food chain, supplying proper material to our mills that consume it. But we're underway now in Cincinnati with another effort. I just get the reports about every other day, and it's amazing that the need, I think I've got data here now that shows that 69% of the contaminants are plastic bags again. Here we go. So it's just a reinforcement of that effort. But if it wasn't really for the EPA stepping into that central role of bringing all the partners together, this wouldn't be done. And we would continue to struggle with these products coming through these plants. So keep up the great work there. We appreciate it. It helps the whole industry as we get cleaner products, and that's what we really need. So just a kind of a thanks there.
Steve, I appreciate that feedback, Mike, as well. I do think there's a lot of opportunity to continue discussions in both of those areas. I know our team has been keenly focused on the issue of contamination, and I think you're kind of spot on. And I mean, our role is to help facilitate discussions, be a presence, provide leadership, provide support, and we've got an exceptional team that's been at this for a long, long time. So they are definitely the subject matter experts. But I think that in my mind, it does come right back to education. And, it does seem odd that we need to kind of educate people again, but we do. And again, we're here to support that. And I think ideas that you have, especially on kind of our anti-littering efforts, we'd be happy to talk further with you about that and do some brainstorming, Mike. I think maybe bringing ODOT and DNR to the table, because they are concerned when they look at things through their lens, ODOT in particular, with all of the roadside trash that they see and that they invest tons of money into cleaning up. So it's a resource issue for them. And I hear from Director Mertz that, unfortunately, a lot of our park systems are seeing an increasing amount of litter as well. So, it's a resource issue for agencies when they have to, spend their time or put employees out there to fix a problem that's preventable. So I think it does come back to how do we work together to send the right compelling messages out there to get people to consider changing their behaviors and their practices. So I think it'd be great to have a brainstorming session around that. I think, Vlad, I don't know if you guys have talked about this, but I think we're also contemplating a litter summit. Have you guys talked at all about that with this team?
I have not. I don't know if Chet, if you've kind of broached that with them. You're muted, Chet.
Thanks, Vlad. I need help this morning. So Director, I think individually we have mentioned kind of the statewide efforts that are going on. We know it in general terms. We don't know the details as necessarily as well as you and your team knows it. There was a litter summit in the past, and I think it would be beneficial, obviously, if we can get this group engaged in that conversation, like you said. And I would appreciate, probably reaching out to Heidi, I guess, and whoever you would deem appropriate for us to bring ODOT and ODNR to the table with MAC and just have that brainstorming conversation, as you mentioned.
Okay.
But definitely, we'll, I think, a litter summit is important. It's imperative. Like you said, unfortunately, we have to continue the efforts that we've done in the past again and again.
Good. Yeah, and Chet, I don't have much more information. I know that it's an idea concept that's been talked about. I think it's gaining some traction. So Heidi would definitely be a good point of contact. And if something does come together, how could this group be helpful and maybe helping to shape the agenda, or we want it to be value added for everyone who's attending. So just an idea that popped into my head, but I don't have more specifics myself, but can certainly get that from Heidi. Any other questions or thoughts or ideas on how you might want to further the conversation? I think I see a hand up.
Elizabeth, if you can unmute yourself. There we go.
Firstly, Director Stevenson and all, thank you for allowing me to join this group. I think a further brainstorming session on both of those topics pertaining to the litter and the market development here in Ohio is absolutely needed. We, as everyone has mentioned, are coming out of this odd, I don't want to call it a hibernation, but we are moving from a COVID community to what is going to be the new normal, which I think we're all trying to ascertain. But those behaviors are drastically affecting both, I think, the litter increase that we are seeing, as well as the impacts on getting clean recyclables to market. Obviously, in the last 14 months to 16 months, folks have had an extreme behavior change. And I think we're seeing that in both of these areas. For example, folks weren't able to hop on a plane and go visit relatives across state lines. So, which is a good thing. They were out enjoying all of our beautiful green spaces here in Ohio. However, the result of that is folks not being as conscientious as they probably should be with the litter. And that also spills over to the management of recyclables. So I think a brainstorming session with all of the knowledge that this committee can bring would definitely be warranted. And thank you for allowing me to participate.
Great, thank you. Anything else?
Hi, Director Stevenson.
Hi.
Thanks for joining us. I just wanted to pass on some kudos to your staff over the last year and a half or so. I've had opportunity to engage with them on multiple training opportunities for registered sanitarians, now environmental health specialists. Been able to keep our CEUs, our continuing education going, and just taking the away from the office time to do some trainings that have been very beneficial. So just great to work with your staff. They've done a great job.
Great, Chuck. Thank you for that feedback. And as I was listening to you, I popped open the participants list because as you said, I mean, we've got a great team wrapped around all of this. You know, they're the best at what they do. And like I talked about, have found ways to still continue to be engaged, to be helpful, to provide resources, to do that training and outreach, you know, even in unusual circumstances. So it's just kind of music to my ears when I hear that you've gotten what you need during this time, but it's not surprising either with the team that we have on this. So I do appreciate it very much. And I'll give a shout out to my team because they are exceptional. And they're really invested in the vision and the mission. And many of them, this has been their entire career. Ernie, Chet, you know, they've been in it. I see Dave and Marie. I see a bunch of my folks here. So, you know, they're all in it with you and here to support you. So appreciate it. I do have to jump off for another meeting, but I would, if we want to do a follow-up or brainstorming, if there's anything else that I can do, or you want anyone else from my team to be plugged in, happy to do that for sure. So with that, I don't know, Ernie, is there anything else you needed from me? Chet?
No, we appreciate you coming, Director.
Okay.
Thank you
Well,
very
thanks
much,
for the
Pam.
opportunity. Everybody have a great rest of the day, and we'll see you again.
Thank you.
All right. Bye.
So, Michael, I think we still need to do a roll call.
We do.
Okay.
We do. Let's get started, and we'll go back through the agenda. Appreciate everybody's participation there. It's good to hear from the director, and it sounds like we're on the right track. That's what I got out of that. So we'll get into that discussion a little bit. So without further ado, is Matt around here someplace to do a roll call?
I sure am. Good morning, everyone. Chuck DeYonker.
Here.
Commissioner Old.
Here.
Okay, Jennifer Fenderbush. Paul Wise.
I'm here.
Beth Biggins-Raymer.
Here.
Marcy Kress.
Here.
Kelly Bensman.
Here.
Kimberly McConville.
Here.
Michael Deneen.
Here.
Steve Sargent.
Here.
Alex Bernke.
Here.
Brian Winter.
Here.
And John Daly.
Here.
Definitely a quorum.
Thank you very much, sir. Do we have any additional EPA updates?
We just have a couple things to share. So we have a number of solid waste districts that have new coordinators, executive directors. And when that happens, we generally do a new coordinator training, and we're planning one of those for this fall. We've been surveying solid waste districts to find out what agenda items should be on there. We'll be developing that agenda once we learn all that. So stay tuned for more on that. Matt headed up a survey for amongst the solid waste districts to learn about drop-offs in their areas in preparation for trying to do a drop-off anti-contamination study in Ohio. So he's working on that effort now. That was one of the state strategies that was in our state plan. So we do actually pay attention to what's in there, believe it or not. And then the director went over our kind of return to work plan. So hopefully eventually we'll be seeing you all in person. I wouldn't expect it right away, but hopefully we'll be able to restart in-person meetings. And just as a note at the end, we'll have to be scheduling more meetings because this is the last one that's scheduled for this year so far. So that's all I got, Michael.
Thank you very much, sir. Minutes were circulated with the agenda from the last meeting. Does anybody have any additions or amendments to those minutes?
I make a motion to approve the April 21st, 2021 meeting minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Wise. Can I get a second?
I will second that. Thanks.
Matt, did you catch who that was?
It was Brian Winter. I think I'm freezing a little bit.
Thanks. All right, I appreciate that. We're going to do this backwards. All opposed?
I will need to abstain.
Did you catch that one, Matt?
I'll need to abstain as well.
I did not catch that second person. Who was that?
It's Kelly.
Kelly, okay. Thank you.
All right. With 2 abstentions and no negative votes, motion carries. Thank you very much. We got through Director Stevenson's presentation. Do we have any, I think we kind of covered everything there. Anybody have any comments on what you heard from her or things that you want to bring to light? Cool. Let's keep moving. Grant Roundup. Ms. Stevens, are you on here? Thank you very much.
Good morning, everybody. Give me a second here and I will have a little bit of visual with the PowerPoint. They have changed how you share screens. That's not it. Hold on 1 minute. I think I have too many things open and it's not showing everything. Hold on 1 second, sorry. Here we go. Okay, can everybody see my PowerPoint slides?
Good to go.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Sorry about that. Okay. So just to go over again, I know we've shared this information in previous meetings, but for the 2021 round, we received 117 applications, totaling a little over 7.4 million. This was kind of an increase from what we saw in previous years. We think a lot of these were repeats from 2020 when we didn't do any funding, but then we had quite a few new ones as well. And this is the breakdown of where they came from. Typically we have about $4.5 million to spend in grants. 3.5 of that comes from the Recycling and Litter Prevention Fund. We always have about $1 million from the Scrap Tire Fund. But as we told you, I think in the last meeting, we were able to, with the director's approval, go to the controlling board, the state controlling board, and request an additional $2 million from that fiscal year 2020 that didn't get spent. So we went and asked for an additional $2 million so that we could fund more projects, and we were that was approved. So instead of our normal $4.5 million, we had $6.5 million to spend this year. So we have made our awards. We have not done our press release yet. That is with our Public Information Center. We're just waiting for them to approve it and send it out. But we have notified all of our grantees and sent them all grant agreements. So this is what we ended up funding for 2021. We funded 103 out of the 117 grants, 77 of them being from community and litter. I do have lists if you want to dive into detail, but just kind of some highlights of those 77. We had 3 new curbside projects. We had about 6 organics projects. We funded 2 Habitat for Humanity locations, which is kind of a new thing for us. We had a couple curbside tagging projects, which we're excited to see, and hoping with the toolkit that we get from the recycling partnership that we'll be doing a lot more of those next year. And we did actually get an application. We're going to be funding a new small nonprofit plastics recycler in Cincinnati. So that was kind of a new thing as well. Under academic, we funded 9 grants under our academic institutions. As the director mentioned, that was an initiative, a kind of a newer initiative for us. We actually started that last year, but because we didn't award any grants, this is actually the first year that we're awarding academic institution grants. Of those, we had 4 K through 12 schools, and then we had kind of a handful. The rest were universities, and we had some smaller and some larger. We did fund a couple of Ohio State projects, Cincinnati, but then University of Findlay and Kent State. So we kind of did a good mix of large and small universities. Under Scrap Tire, we are funding 5 projects under there. 3 of them are paving projects and 2 are tire processing. And then under market development, we have 12 of those. Totaling a little over 1.7 million. 3 of those are C&DD projects. We have 1 private glass MRF up in Northwest Ohio. We're doing a brand new sports venue. Those of you in Columbus may know who that is. So that's the breakdown of what we're funding this year. With that additional spending authority, the huge impact with that was community and litter grants. We were able to fund 25 more community and litter grants that would not have been funded under with the regular spending authority. So a good bulk of that, about, I'd say a little over half of that 2 million went to community and litter. The other half went to market development grants. So we were able to add an additional 7. So instead of 5 market development grants, we were able to award 12. And that ended up being, a significant increase. Instead of only funding 61% of the applications that we received, we were able to fund 88% of them. You may notice we actually have 300,000 left over, but we really didn't feel that those remaining 14 were viable or projects that were ready to be funded. So we did actually, we did make a cutoff there, and there were some that still didn't get funded. But we were very happy to fund a majority of the projects this year. So any questions?
April, we did have a question about can you speak more about the recycling partner in Cincinnati, or do we need to wait till the public announcement?
I don't know. I mean, they are aware. It's called here I can hold on 1 second. It's called Cincinnati Recycling and Reuse Hub. Dave, did you want to?
Yeah.
You dove deeply into their application and grant award, so if you want to.
Yeah. So it's a new nonprofit that's basically taking the plastics that wouldn't be normally accepted in the curbside stream. And so they have partnerships, I think, with TerraCycle and some other companies that can take some of the tougher, 3 to 7 plastics and whatnot. So that's basically what it is. I think they'll still take some other things, but it's stuff that doesn't fit into curbside. So it's going to be kind of interesting. They're a newer, like April said, it's Cincinnati Recycling and Reuse Hub. And the grant funded equipment pallet jacks, those type of things, platform trucks to move movement material around. So it's kind of like a nonprofit MRF, although like it didn't fit under the MRF category. It came under equipment. Does that help? And we can as we move forward, if we can even provide information of their contact information, all that. But it's a new process for them. So
Alyssa Yoderman was the one who asked the question,
Yeah.
and she has her hand up. So Alyssa, do you have further questions to ask?
I guess I had one more question. So the Cincinnati, it's a reuse hub, you said?
The name is Cincinnati Recycling and Reuse Hub. That's their name.
I was wondering, if any of these grantees are supporting like the refill reuse sector that reduces waste.
Yeah, typically our grants tend to be, the way it's designed is more of a recycling. We are looking at ways to kind of move up that hierarchy and look at reuse or source reduction. That's kind of on our radar for future rounds. The way it's set up right now, it's traditionally been recycling. So the way the questions and the way the grant application itself is designed is more for recycling. So we're looking at ways that we can also offer some support to source reduction and reuse, and still trying to figure out what's the best way to do that, whether it's a separate grant type or if there's a way to kind of work that into our current process. But it is definitely on our radar.
Yeah, the city of Cleveland has been having some interesting things come out about supporting, the circular economy and really keeping waste, as long as possible, in that stream before it exits to the landfill. I just did want to flag for folks that TerraCycle, has come out and talked about how they send their waste to the incinerator. So I think that they have a lot of really good intention, but I just, if the goal is to recycle, that obviously is not being recycled on their end. I can send around folks a new article that came out too, if anyone's interested.
Alyssa, if you send that to me, I can get it out to the members.
Okay. Thanks.
And hi, everybody. I actually was one of the reviewers on this, and I know that the nonprofit in question is just starting out, but it's not just plastics. They do universal waste, electronics. The grant, I think, was specific to the plastics and the TerraCycle, but they do basically anything that's not accepted through the general curbside recycling program. They're trying to target, and I imagine they'll be expanding what they're collecting and perhaps even getting into the reusables as well.
I actually put the link in the chat to Alyssa, so sorry, just to the hub. And you do bring up a good point about TerraCycle. I've heard about that too, but it's not all going to TerraCycle. They have found some other vendors, but it does bring up the question, the challenges with plastics and packaging, and designing out, ultimately you want to design the most efficient packaging. So for reuse or minimalization and all that, that's something that's being looked at. Like I know with all the movement right now with looking at recycling infrastructure, it's not only like how it can be recycled, but how it can be designed with intent for the end of use or reuse with the circularity issues.
Well, thank you very much, everybody. Ms. Stevens, appreciate your presentation. Dave, thank you for the additions. Anybody else have any more questions?
We'll make sure when those press releases are done, we'll make sure that I'll have Ernie send one out to the group so that you guys can get the full list with the list of projects.
Thank you very much. So now we've kind of seen what we're doing currently, what's happening with the grant program currently. And then last time we convened a subcommittee to discuss how we can make it even better than it already is. And I believe Ms. McConville is going to give us a kind of an overview of where those discussions led, and so that we can hopefully present some feedback and let them continue. And then ultimately the goal, at least the goal in my mind, is to be able to take that, boil it down into some recommendations, and present that to the board and make a motion and have a recommendation to give to the director and the Chief Roush, of things that we believe would be beneficial to the program. So, Ms. McConville, if you would, please.
Sounds good. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I wanted to thank everyone who made time for the last 2 meetings of the subcommittee. I think we could have talked for hours. We were kind of in a time crunch, but that suggests to me that there's a lot to talk over. There are a lot of possibilities for improvement. And I wanted to give a special thanks to April, Marie, and Dave for being extremely generous with time, pulling materials together sort of at the last minute. And before I give the overview, I think always erring on the side of more information is good, particularly for this group, because there are so many great ideas, bright minds, different backgrounds. So in addition to the list of award recipients or grant recipients, I think it might be helpful to have a little summary of the project. So, again, the questions related to the Cincinnati Reuse and Recycling Hub kind of illustrates our thirst for knowledge. So, for what it's worth, April, a little summary in addition to that, just for MAC, I think would be really helpful. So, our 2 discussions, and we're not done, we intend to meet a couple of more times. So the purpose of my report today is to let you guys know what we've talked about and to get some immediate feedback on some of the ideas and maybe new directions for the subcommittee. So I would put our work into 3 buckets: awareness of the grant programs, ease of use, and then the responsiveness of the grant. So turning our attention to awareness, we all agreed that the grant should probably be marketed more widely. And there were a number of ideas on how we could get to that marketing piece. Making sure the Ohio Materials Marketplace users are all aware of the program. They pop into the marketplace to find materials and to discard materials. It would be great if we could somehow be sure that they were aware of the grant. We also talked about Jobs Ohio. Very, very frequently, the great staff at EPA will refer businesses to Jobs Ohio for much larger grants. So our thought was, let's kind of reverse engineer that. Let's make sure our friends at Jobs Ohio are also sending maybe smaller projects back to the EPA grants program for consideration. But probably more intriguingly, let's take a look at the current recipients of some Jobs Ohio grants, some large manufacturers, and let's look at some of their byproducts and see if they could be useful feedstock for some of the processors and end users here in Ohio. So again, trying to get to that circular economy. So that was another suggestion. And then finally, we feel like the private sector is this vast, untapped marketing potential. Ohio is home to many, many plastics processors. And I've become privy to a little more information on that because of our industry's Every Bottle Back initiative and partnerships with the Recycling Partnership and Closed Loop Partners. Closed Loop Partners in particular has mapped out plastics processors across the country. So we believe that's another way to reach processors and maybe drive more in the market development grant sector. So that's awareness. And I'll just go through these 3 areas quickly and then open it up for discussion. So then ease of use of the application for our grants and the disbursement of the money. EPA has surveyed past recipients, and like any survey, the participation rate is kind of low. Any of you have done surveys, and I certainly have been in that category. It's often disappointing that you don't get a lot of people returning the survey. So maybe get a little more creative and put together forums of past grant recipients. Ask staff to contact past grant recipients with just a short list of questions. Is the application easy to move through? Do you feel supported by staff? Do you have any suggestions for streamlining the actual application? I think Marie had a great idea of adding a few of these types of procedural questions on any closeout reports that current grant recipients are required to complete. I think that's a winner. And then we did have some discussion, and this kind of speaks to disbursement of the grants and probably application too. The fact that you need a government sponsor as a private sector person to apply for any of the grants might or might not be a hindrance in terms of attracting more people to the grant. We had a really balanced discussion, I think, about agility versus safeguards. There are very credible reasons for partnering this government sponsor with any private sector actors seeking the grants. At the end of the day, it is public money. So I think that we have a lot more to explore on that topic, frankly, and maybe some of the surveys could help us get to that, or discussions. And then the third area, responsiveness of grants. I think this is the area in which our subcommittee will have a lot more to say in future meetings. But I think we're all convinced that this grant program needs to be as agile as possible, focus on critical markets, really looking at impact metrics and the circular economy. A few years ago, glass was brought to the attention of the agency as something that was very difficult to recycle. There were a number of end users interested in more post-consumer glass. So some efforts were put in gathering the right people together to create more ideas and opportunities for MRF modifications. So lots more to explore in the critical markets, and perhaps a focus on specific material streams. Plastics and cardboards come immediately to mind. So yeah, the subcommittee is well underway, and we hope to meet more. But I'm going to stop talking now and ask for, I guess, reactions to our initial ideas. And we certainly would welcome any additional participants too. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. That was excellent. Anybody have any responses, comments, or the subcommittee, Ms. McConville? Well, that's no good. I don't like that response. So I'll give mine, and then I'll poke somebody, and we'll see who I get to poke. I think all that stuff is great. From a limited funding perspective, the idea of marketing, I think your ideas are excellent, of the people that are already kind of in the program and looking and that kind of thing. The idea of marketing, what do we market to? Being specific, not necessarily shooting with birdshot and getting it everywhere. Find out each year, what do we really want to target? Is there an industry market that we want to target, or a plan for 2 years or whatever? So you do outreach that really is set up to accomplish a goal. The funding process, I don't know the background for why it's done the way it's done. I know that some of the grants have been done directly before, special assistance grants and things of that nature, so I know it can be done. but I don't know the reasoning behind that. I'd be curious to see if one of the members of the agency, Chet or Marie, if you can explain to us why that was done that way. And then the only other comment that I have is we talked a lot about education with the director today. We also talked a lot about the idea that things come back up, they're recurring, and that the education of some of these projects and things like that's really important. And I know some of these projects have matching funds and that kind of stuff. Maybe it's a concept that some of these programs and grants need to have an education component to them. How are we going to teach the community about what we're doing and allow that to be a part of the match, the spend on that, or something along those lines, even for the market development grants? Hey, how are you going to tell people that this is what you're doing and what you actually need for your shed area or for the local community, that kind of thing? Might be an interesting concept to add as a, let's make sure we get this done, because it sounds like we educate people a little bit and then they forget the next year and we kind of lose that momentum, if you will.
Mr. Chairman, if I could, you're spot on. We did talk about education, particularly as it relates to anyone looking to start a curbside program or anyone who applies for recycling carts to expand an existing curbside program, that it's such a great opportunity. We have this wealth of information from the Recycling Partnership on how to do curbside right, how to reduce that contamination that's so important to our friends at Rumpke and certainly our processor friends. And that is spot on, like really, and I'll use a term that Chet uses a lot, like really connecting all those dots. Instead of giving money in isolation, it's like, okay, this is great. You're going to buy these recycling carts. What's your plan for education? And I know staff does try to do that informally, but we might need to sharpen that up a little.
Yeah, and the only other comment that I would have is one shoe does not always fit all. So while we have got a funding source and a direction of how the contracts flow and everything that's pretty consistent across all the grant programs, that doesn't necessarily mean that it needs to be that way. If you find a way that works, if we have a discussion, some of those may be different. So, Chet, do you have a history lesson for us?
Yeah, I just, Marie just texted me, gave me permission to go ahead. So, so the special assistance grant, to be honest with you, Mr. Chairman, I don't remember when we started using it, but I will tell you the background of it had to do with that our grant program, excuse me, that April and Dave and Marie and them all operate today, obviously has a defined schedule that it operates on. And in the real world, companies specifically don't operate on the same schedule that our grant program operates on. And sometimes there are opportunities that staff sees that we would like to bring to the director and say, this is a great opportunity. However, it's not going to fit within our grants.
And this is the power of team meetings.
Chet, you're locked up. I don't know if you can hear me.
Okay, sorry.
There you go.
Technical difficulties. So I'll try to be quicker. So basically, it allowed for us to have some flexibility to fund projects immediately if we saw the opportunity. The other option was, listen, if this is a statewide, it impacts markets statewide or even regionally, it gave us an opportunity to be a partner, a financial partner in moving a project or program forward. The Recycling Partnership was an example of that. This is something they had come to us, and to be honest with you, I had recommended that we not fund their initial proposal for a couple of reasons. One of which we ran out of money, but looking at it, we knew it was important to do. So we asked basically a couple of months after the grant award that we revisit this. And we worked with the Recycling Partnership to refine their proposal. And obviously this impacts statewide. It impacts industry-wide. It impacts communities that, have curbside. And so we knew it was extremely important to be part of and to help drive so that we would hit the goals that we intended. And so that was a special assistance grant. Now, I know folks don't necessarily like that term because it seems, or it may appear to be helping someone specifically or a specific company. But I assure you that all those grants went through the same process that any other grant that came through the door. We did all our due diligence. We checked all of, the state auditor's site and, would check on the company themselves or the community that was applying for it. They all had to sign contracts just like, any other grantee. But the fact that it was kind of outside of the norm, gave some folks some pause. And so I guess there's some good in some not perfect elements to it. But this is how we addressed really real world opportunities. And, I still believe that it is a good tool to have in the toolbox. It's not something to use every time. It has to kind of meet that, criteria of it's time specific. It's market specific. It can, it impacts statewide kind of thing. And it kind of have to go through that litany or criteria of a review. But it has had very good success in the past. Not perfect, but it has had good success in the past.
2 comments on that, Chet. Number one, it may be important to kind of have something out there that says that kind of thing exists. Kind of define it maybe a little bit better and say that it exists. But number 2, the question becomes, that program is a direct funded program from the state rather than a funded program through a sponsor. The functionality and the direction of the money, from a history perspective, why was it chosen to be done through a sponsor for the market development grants rather than direct funded as the special assistance grants would have been done?
So the sponsorship concept of the market development grant itself, as well as if it was a special assistance grant to a company, would still include a sponsorship from a local government. We felt it was important that we run it exactly as if it had come through the door during the 2.5 months that the traditional grant was open. Sponsorships were important because we felt that the local government should have been engaged in some form or fashion. To be honest with you, not everyone in the private sector, again, as I said before, is always perfectly honest. And so we've had in the past a couple of companies, maybe a handful of companies that kind of fall in that category, and had indicated that they were working with the local government, in which case they truly were not. So it's a reaffirmation for us that yes, your local government, local jurisdiction which you're operating in or wish to operate in is aware of this program or this service or this company, and they're engaged and they're supportive of it. And potentially they can financially assist in that program or service or company. And so it was important for us to understand that, as well as we talked about the money, flow. And I think the grant program has done, the folks up there have done a great job about improving how the issuance of the money goes today versus when I was there. So it was just important to have that engagement, but also to take a more conservative approach because of a couple bad apples, to reassure us that the money itself was in good hands, and we knew where the money was, and it wasn't going to be spent until the project was done, that it was a reimbursement grant versus, here, let me give you a blank check. I believe that you'll do what you said you'll do, kind of thing. And 99.9% of the time, companies will do exactly what they say they're going to do. It's the 0.1% that we have to be wary of. And we always say that we are good stewards of taxpayer dollars. And so even though this is C&D money and it's scrap tire money, we view it the same way as if it is taxpayer dollars. And so was our concern in the past. The process can always be improved, but it takes a conversation for those improvements to occur, which is what your subcommittee is working on, to relook at the process and make sure that if there are improvements to be made, they can be made.
Well, thank you. Does anybody else have any comments on the subcommittee?
Go ahead, Steve.
Well, I was just going to say, I know Marcy and I both kind of representing the public to private separation, which was great. I think Kimberly, you hit it right. We had multiple conversations about this, and a lot talked about things. I think one thing that we looked at was to streamline. I love the concept of a Jobs Ohio relationship, where if a new potential client would be coming to look at Ohio, then somebody could survey or ask them questions about their waste stream, possibly in advance, and how that could be connected to already existing programs, maybe in a local community, to maybe increase that communication link. So I think these are great discussions to have just to continue to improve the program. So just great couple sessions, and I think we want to do a couple more.
All right. Well, it sounds like you guys are on a great plan, great path forward. Really look forward to seeing something that we can take action on, as we have done before, of making consensus and bold moves forward with the support from all parties involved, which is a great thing to create, and a trust level to build upon. So thank you very much to the subcommittee, and look forward to hearing more from you.
Michael, before we move on,
yep.
We have a guest joining us from Republic. She's going to call in here in just a second, or join the meeting here in just a second. She's going to be involved with Steve for the next discussion. So
okay.
I just called her to tell her to join the meeting.
Well, let's
there she is right now. I'm admitting her now. So
okay.
Do you want me to introduce her?
Give me just a second.
Yep.
We'll go ahead and have the discussion while she gets on the phone, gets everybody set up. Planning for the next meeting, unless we have a dissension and people don't want to do it, I think we need to stick to the every 2-month plan. I think that this day works pretty well in the middle of the week, 10 o'clock. Hopefully we can get to see each other at some point in time here in the relatively near future. But unless somebody has some other point, I'd like to just have Ernie extend out the every 2-month schedule at the same pace going forward. Okay.
I think that's a good plan.
We'll make that happen. I think we have everybody here. Mr. Sargent, and then Ernie, if you would introduce our friend from Republic, I'd appreciate it. And we'll get started with the next discussion.
So we have on the meeting with us, Rosanna, and I apologize. I should have asked you. Is your last name pronounced just as it looks, Marchese?
It's Marchese.
Marchese. I never should pronounce anybody's last name because I always get it wrong. So Rosanna is now with Republic. We had been talking with Steve and Rosanna when we had just a little meet and greet, and we were talking a little bit about the topic that's coming up here. And Republic has some similar things that Rumpke's going to talk about, and we thought it would be good for Rosanna to be involved. So welcome, Rosanna, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me. It's nice to meet everyone.
So, Steve, do you want to take over first?
Well, I can. I was going to make a joke that I've got applications I'm sending to everyone on the committee, and you're eligible for the $7,500 signing bonus for the Columbus market. But it's really an issue that Ernie asked us to address this. And Rosanna, great for you to be on the call with me. I try to represent the industry, but there's so many facets to what our industry is doing right now to try to address the labor shortage issue. I just heard this morning coming in, it was very interesting that the city of Columbus now needs 100 extra bus drivers for this school season to start, and they're going to have to pick those up very quickly at a starting rate of $18 an hour. Now it's a different group of drivers than what we look for, but still it just shows you the increased, I guess, intensity of what we're dealing with within our industry. We don't need to talk a lot about the labor shortages just within the general population. But I think you have to kind of look back at when the pandemic started. Waste collection and recycling services were considered essential services. When people were leaving their offices and going back to their homes to work, we were doing quite the opposite. We were leaving our homes, going into the workplace because we had to continue to provide these services. And they were really essential. And also when you compound the problem is that when the folks went back to our residences, our tonnages skyrocketed off the curb, both for recycling and for residential waste collection. At the same time, our drivers were dealing with the same situation that we all dealt with, and childcare and all the things at home. So we know what happened. I think it's important to look at, though, when you look at the labor pool in the U.S., just when we talk about the general population, when you have to really zero in on who can qualify for a CDL driver position and who can qualify for some of those tasks that we work with. Those are regulatory through the federal government, and we have to work through that. So our availability, even in the mechanic technical side, has really been a challenge. And I don't want to get ahead of Rosanna, what you're going to hit, but I will say, and you'll probably agree with me, our industry has looked at it from really two perspectives. One is on actually recruitment now. What are we doing today to recruit? We were in front of the city of Columbus last week. If you're in the Columbus market, we have the yard waste and recycling collection contract. It's a seasonal contract. So at the same time the pandemic hit us, then the yard waste season was just starting to explode. In April, May, and June, we get hit hard. We need 40 additional drivers at least in trucks to pick that up. And it's really been a challenge for us. And we've tried to be very upfront, transparent with our customers. That's important as we talk about that. We have done some unique things in regard to immediately. We've addressed it by putting a $7,500 signing bonus that's paid in the Columbus market over a 12-month period. That's today. We're doing that. It's helping a little bit, but I think what's more help, we're starting to see the labor, our potential applicants return back to the workforce. That's starting to happen. We monitor this daily, and today we've got more folks in our trainee program than we've had since the beginning of the year. So that's been a real help. And that on the retention side, that's a little bit longer term. Once you get a driver or you get someone as a mechanic, how do you keep them? Because the competition, honestly, folks, is fierce out there today. And you've seen it. I would love to be a high school graduating senior today because I could probably go to work and name my price. I didn't realize that Cedar Point now has gone to $20 an hour instead of $10. And they're shutting their locations down during the middle of the week because they can't get the folks to work. So it's something that's really we're dealing with on a national basis. Waste Management, and I've talked to some folks there, they just rolled out a program called Your Tomorrow. If you Google search, it's very interesting. It's in the area of tuition, support, and credit to get a college degree, not only for the employee, but also for someone in the family to assist in that. So very unique. We're all watching this to see what the responses are. So we're trying to deal with the recruitment issue initially and then deal with long-term on the retention side. But I'll tell you, it's had a real spillover effect in the recycling area that I focus on. got a call from one of the regional paper mills that we supply a lot of tons to about 3 weeks ago. And they told us that they were not able on the over the road drivers, but there's a challenge there. They could not get the drivers in to pick up the finished product from our plants. So we've had to go into the marketplace with small hauling companies to try to get some support to get the finished product to the mills. And if you've read recently in the last couple of weeks, the cardboard market has taken off again. We saw another large increase a couple of weeks ago in pricing. We hear that some mills are possibly going to be running out of material around the 4th of July weekend. And all this is kind of coming together in kind of a perfect storm. So our industry is trying to deal with it now. But I think maybe that's enough said from my perspective. And Rosanna, maybe I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it, Steve. I think from our perspective, not only are we seeing a driver shortage, but there is a huge increase in volume, especially from a residential perspective. We're picking up basically 3 to 1 of what we did at this same time last year. So for every yard, we have 3 additional. And we had thought that we had seen the lion's share of the material last year when we were during the pandemic. But apparently more and more people have decided that they were going to do more things at home. And a lot of the workforce is still at home working. So when we go pick up material, we're doing a lot more loads per route, especially from a residential perspective. And we have so many requirements. Not only is it difficult to hire the drivers because of the requirements, but we're also managed from a regulatory perspective from the DOT. So our drivers can only be on the road so long. They have to have a 10-hour time frame between the time they leave our shop and they come back. So it's getting to the point where the volume is increasing. The landfills can only be open for so long. Our drivers have to be off the road. It's becoming a perfect storm for us. And what we're trying to do is find creative ways to manage the volume. We're all in the same hiring scenario. We're also dealing with steel issues with regards to containers. We're dealing with transportation and trying to get pieces of equipment that we can get into to maintain our fleets. We're having the same issue from a recycling perspective. So it's industry led, and I don't even think it falls into our industry. I think it's outside our industry. It's just there's definitely an issue, and I don't know how many of you have been on the road recently, but there are a lot of people trying to get their CDLs right now. Doesn't necessarily mean they should be driving a truck, but they have a CDL to do so. And so we're really trying as a company, we have to be extremely careful. For everyone in our industry, we participate in a national safety advisory, and we're required to do a lot of things. And, obviously we maintain, we have 300 drivers and we have 300 pieces of equipment here where I am. And it's a very large responsibility to make sure we put the right people in the right trucks. There's a lot of maneuvering that goes on. They're not over the road drivers. They're backing up, they're pulling in, and they're working within residential neighborhoods. And in the summer, we all know there's lots of children. So there's a lot that we have to do. We're also struggling from a residential recycling perspective, trying to teach the residents the better way to dispose of their recyclable material. When we bring things into our facilities, we would really prefer they be clean and not have a lot of residual waste, because we're basically defeating the purpose. So with the volume and with the hiring scenario that we're in, and we all do exactly the same things, we're processing. We go to high schools, we talk to kids, try to recruit them, we train them from a CDL perspective within our organization and help them get there. Same thing with the college. So we're all doing pretty much the same thing. And right now we're going to get to the point where we're going to have to work with our communities to try to continue to educate on how to source separate so we save space in the site. But the volume of material is unprecedented right now. No idea where some of this material comes from, but it's our job to get it off the ground. But we also have to make sure that we're being conscientious of our employees and their time and their work-life balance. So we're asking the same thing that Steve's team is. We're trying our best to make sure that we can take care of the communities, being very transparent about what's going on. But, we have to make sure that we're following the compliance between the regulators at the landfills and the Department of Transportation on the streets. There are a lot of requirements that we have that we're trying to make sure that we fulfill as well. So we're all in the same scenario.
Thank you very much, both of you. I know that this has hit the news and it's hitting everything, and it reminds me of one of the other conversations we had a couple of years ago, and how we ended up with the recycling partnership and that program that was put together to try to prevent some contamination, which has been, in my mind, extremely successful and continues to grow in its effectiveness. We had a conversation about the grants program before you got on, Rosanna, and in my mind, it begs the question after this discussion. I believe, if memory serves me right, there's still an employment hiring, how many people do we hire perspective in the grants program. Is that still in place? Does anybody know?
I'm not sure.
In the
Dave.
application, they do ask for how many new positions would be as a result of the project as part of the response.
While I think that's important, I think there's some efficiencies and things that may be important to add to the discussion, Kimberly and Steve, on the idea of how is there an efficiency standpoint if you're looking at a completely circular economy. How many trucks are we sending down the street? How often are things coming? Maybe there's a piece of the market development that's not always just equipment. Maybe it's efficiency. How do we make our things better? Kind of an idea of how do we make the system work better, more efficiently, less impact on people, possibly less employees. We're going to save a head count here or something like that, going the opposite direction of and allowing that to be an idea or a concept in the grant program. This is going to save me a person. This is going to save the job of a person. We're going to redirect that person to education. We're going to add that full-time employee to education or something like that because we saved him someplace else. We're seeing in the construction industry a huge issue with hiring people as well, especially people that I was talking to Chet and Ernie before we got on the call. You know, the person that swings a sledgehammer to drive a pin out of a machine, a 20-pound sledge or a 30-pound sledge, that also has to be able to punch the keys on a computer to be able to plug that computer into that machine. The idea of finding that in a single person is becoming extremely hard to find. So we have to figure out how to either find that person, say that that's a great job, or not. But I think the grants program, it's important to kind of be holistic there. It might be worth part of that discussion.
I think I could hit one, Michael, and I think it's a very simplified response. And I didn't plan to show this, but see that pie chart? I just got that this morning, and this is on the partnership program that we're doing, the tagging program today in Cincinnati. This goes through July the 2nd. EPA has done a great job of that. That blue is plastic bags. That is what is coming in this tagging. That's what we're seeing on the street. So think about it this way: when you run a facility to save money, to save resources, we don't want another truck going away from that plant to the landfill. We've already got trucks going to landfills off the curb. So our goal is to minimize the trash going into those facilities. I think as Rosanna has talked about in her plans, as in mine and as the waste management, we need less garbage going in these facilities and take those resources and use those for education. So I'm a little concerned that we're seeing this data on the street. Now, we have seen success once we tag and tell residents, don't put these products in your stream, because all those plastic bags can go back to the local Kroger. So there's a place to take those now. Now, we're going to see some of those go away soon because people are going to move away from the plastic bag container. That's a whole other issue. But that's one area. It's a simplified look. We've got to continue to educate our customers. We want to do this. This is a good program, and we don't want to put non-recyclable material into these programs.
Hey, Steve, that kind of, we actually had a question in our chat about that, and just that, the question was that you had mentioned that there's 67% of contamination is plastic bags. Is there a way to get like a film collector like Kroger to provide something that's what is accepted? Because I'm sure if you're getting the wrong things in your bins, Kroger's probably getting the wrong things too, right? So that was the question. Is there a way to get a video or webinar and what is accepted?
From the perspective of the curbside programs?
I think it's more, it may have been more a question for me. To get somebody like the ones who actually collect it to tell us what's acceptable. So I just don't know, for those of you out there, if you know how much of that's available, like if that information is readily available. But we can look into doing that for potentially something in the future.
We would support that, absolutely.
As would we.
Mm-hmm.
Ernie,
We're getting ready to do the same thing in Lorraine at the 28th of the month, to do the same exact thing that they're doing in Cincinnati. So we actually do have videos and we do have training. So I'm sure that we could work as a collective group, because the more educated everyone within the state is, the better off it'll be for overall for everyone.
It's money well spent at every point in the process, you guys. And again, it bears repeating, bringing the recycling partnership in under the special assistance grant was such a terrific investment in the continuation. And, from the private sector perspective, through our industries, Every Bottle Back initiative, anytime we invest in curbside recycling, we also require that educational component. So those two just always need to travel together. And I gave a very modest grant to the city of Youngstown just from my own association. And they were very happy to bring recycling bins downtown. But I just said, what's your plan to educate people on how to use these beautiful new bins? And they were like, oh, we'll figure it out. I'm like, well, I have a good resource for you. There's no need to reinvent that wheel, right? So, while I have the floor, I wanted to make a comment about the CDL shortage. Our industry certainly is feeling that pain as well. So anyone you see driving a Rumpke truck could easily drive a Pepsi or a Coke truck. So there's fierce competition. But I wanted, and maybe you guys are already aware of this, but we would love the waste industry support on a piece of federal legislation called the Drive Safe Act. That's Senate Bill 659 and House Resolution 1745. It would actually permit 18-year-olds to drive interstate routes with a lot of additional training and safeguards. So the point of the legislation would be to increase the pool of eligible CDL drivers. I know my industry prefers to hire people 25 and older to drive their trucks, but we are supporting this piece of legislation just because 18-year-olds can drive intrastate now. They can drive from Twinsburg to Cincinnati, no problem. But an 18-year-old cannot drive from Cincinnati to Kentucky, just across the bridge. So this would tackle that. And I know it's not the only solution, but the more efforts we can make to increase the pool, the better for our friends in the waste hauling industry and any way we get goods to market. It doesn't matter what you make. We need drivers.
Mm-hmm. Steve, this is Paul over in Genoa Township. It's been a rough road the last few months being a public official with a trash contract. And I know you guys have faced an uphill battle with your labor shortage. And I've taken some black eyes for you. And I think when your VP came to town, he took a black eye or two when he met with our trustees. But I do have to commend you, because last week we were on time and everything was picked up on the day that we have. And unfortunately, Genoa is a Friday pickup. And so if there's a problem in the beginning of the week, it just trickles down and multiplies by the time it hits Friday. So since March, we've been collected on Saturday or Monday, and it's been hard to educate a lot of our residents why this is happening. But I think finally your group of communication experts are actually taking some initiative now. Instead of letting us be your customer service, you guys are putting out regular email messages to the customers, and they really are appreciating that and are sympathetic towards your plight when that happens. When it comes from like a public official, I know Chet probably will understand this. It's kind of like, oh, really? Is that really what's happening? Or are you doing something behind the scenes or something. But yeah, I do appreciate everything you've done. And if there is some kind of video, some kind of little small sniglet of an educational piece for like on a plastic bag that you can produce that we could put out in a municipal setting, we can blow this thing through our Facebook, do whatever, and get a lot of people educated real fast. So it just doesn't have to be advertised on TV, because we would love to help you make things cleaner in your waste stream. So thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Appreciate it. I know the townships have really, we've struggled across the board, as a lot of companies have. But so thank you for working. I think the thing that we've learned through this is the information. Not only does our industry have the issue, but are we communicating what the residents can expect? When can I expect to get this picked up from the curb? And that's power in that information to know that. So, I talked to Mark O'Brien this morning, and a lot of people don't know, Rosanna actually responded to this somewhat and mentioned it, but we've got 30 drivers today in the CDL clearinghouse process. So you do not want to put unqualified drivers on the street behind a 25-ton vehicle. That's critically important that we do that. So thank you for your comments, and we know we've got a job to do. It's ahead of us.
We have a Beth Biggins Raymer. His hand is up, and I think she may want to address the rest of council.
Thank you, Ernie. I wanted to echo both the chairman's thoughts on, as well as the subcommittee's thoughts on the grant and kind of all of the issues that we've been talking about. Maybe on an annual basis, or this group should get together, and with all of the problems that we've discussed today, for example, the contamination, the increase, how can we better markets? If the focus of the grants that are awarded could better deal with those types of items, meaning, come this fall when those grants are put forth again, for advertising, if it could be communicated that this round of grants is going to focus more on how can one, better educate the public on eliminating contamination by plastic bags or whatnot. That way, those applying for the grant could be more focused on the absolute problem that we're all having, and hopefully that could carry forward. And it may be that if we put a focus of a grant out one year, it could carry into a second year, or maybe there's a particular year where we've got kind of two focuses. The idea being is this group maybe does some long-term planning, and with that is able to kind of guide, everyone in the state towards helping fix the litany of problems that have been discussed today, versus just simply saying in generality, here's a community grant, buy some more carts. That's great to buy carts, but if you're not, as it has been said numerous times today, if you're not educating everyone properly on what to put in the cart, or, doing a tag program to back that education, that enforcement up, it was just an idea I wanted to share. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I'm relatively good at throwing out some interesting concepts, and I asked it of Chet and Ernie one time, and I don't think we came to the conclusion of what we had, but I just Google searched, what can I recycle in Ohio? Okay. And I get 100 different websites, half of them corporate websites, half of them communities, and they're all different. Half the people in the state probably don't even know what community they live in. We talked earlier about a clearinghouse and the EPA being a clearinghouse. It almost seems to me that if we want to help people figure out what to recycle, there needs to be a singular clearinghouse of, I'm here, what can I recycle from here? Whether that be from my curbside program or whether that be from my drop-off location or whatever, but a singular source that's going to show up, because I'm not going to spend, I think, what did I hear the other day? The younger generation now has an attention span of 8 seconds. So I would imagine that if they can't figure out what they want to do in 15 seconds, they're going to just do whatever they think is the right thing to do, whether that be wish cycle or not, they're just going to do it. So if I'm going to say something that's just as important as a recycling partnership, I think there's something that says we have to be able to give the public the opportunity to find it as a single source. What can I recycle? Here's my address. Here's your provider. Done. And I don't know if that's possible. It's a lofty goal. But if we don't scratch that itch in 15 seconds or less, I think you've lost the customer. Kimberly, what do you think?
I think there's a need for a lot of wraparound messaging, and I can speak to what our industry is doing with like a $6 million ad campaign that's running everywhere, not just on TV, because who watches TV anymore? Streaming platforms, you have to reach people everywhere. You have to reach them multiple times, at least 5 times, to reinforce the message. We're putting messages on the caps of PET plastic bottles, but even that is proving a problem because I saw a video of one of our grant recipients explaining what goes in a recycling bin, and she asked everyone to take the caps off the bottles. And I was dying 1,000 deaths, because that is really the polar opposite of our messaging and the messaging of most recycling experts. Those caps are 100% recyclable. They should stay on the bottles so that they don't pop around like popcorn and clog all of Steve's equipment at a MRF. So we have a lot of work to do in education, and we just have to keep at it. I think I don't want us to feel so discouraged, because there's never been a bigger focus, in my opinion, on the contamination issue. China helped start that conversation, but I see a lot of really well-informed, well-financed interests paying attention to that conversation. So it will change, but we have to have wraparound messaging. And consistency is such a challenge, just based on the one example I just gave you with the short video. It was very dismaying.
Ernie, you're muted.
I'm sorry. We have a hand raised here. So Alyssa, if you'd like to address council.
Yeah, I guess, like having like such an informed audience right now, I do feel like I've heard things just like about studies going on for litter. Like, we know these problems are happening. I'm a little uncomfortable with public dollars, like being invested in these, the closed loop, the closed loop recycling, the recycling partnerships. Like, these are all funded by the folks who are creating the waste, and we're not actually involving them in this conversation. Like, I've heard things about how you can have better designs, they could take on some responsibility about labeling, and honestly, like, ODOT is paying how much money a year? $4 million a year, right, to remove waste, where this grant has funded $6.5 million. I work with so many communities. Almost every single major city has at least one employee like dedicated to picking up trash. Let's total all that up. How much is all this waste like costing our citizens? And it's like, I feel like this group is getting like a little off-sided of like actual like addressing the cause. I mean,
what would you suggest the cause is?
Well, some of like including some of these things that I've suggested. Like, let's move the shift up against, you know, like who's creating this waste? Where's their, you know, like where's their, I mean, I would like to see investments in, you know, small companies that are creating jobs in Ohio for, you know, circular economy, and not granting large corporations who are actually creating the waste themselves.
Well, through this program and what this commission is challenged with is dealing with what we have at the moment. While there are larger social issues in place, whether it be the circular economy, whether it be the companies that create the waste or the humans that throw it out of their window rather than finding a trash can, both are at issue. I think it's a fiscal issue. Excuse me?
I think it's a fiscal issue. Like, look at how much funds the state is paying to reduce all this waste.
It absolutely is. And I think that's where we have the opportunity here to bring the corporate citizen in to both talk about what they're doing, which is they're doing some of that on their own, but also bring in the education piece and trying to eliminate the litter that's happening through education, and help the recycling program so they can be more efficient, so they can reduce their cost. There's something to be said for that. And our goal in this group is at the moment to bring both those parties together to continue to build trust and to build relationships and partner with those two groups to spend both public and private funds to accomplish the goal. One step at a time, because normally we as humans don't like hard stops. We don't deal well with them. So while I appreciate your goal, and I think that it's true, and we are bringing those groups to the table, I expect that, you know, Kimberly and Alex's groups both will come and talk about education and participate in whatever we find. And Steve and Roseanne, they have already participated in the contamination reduction programs, their own funds, the communities and the corporations themselves. While we don't have a lot of influence on the production of materials here, we are dealing with the back end. So we're catching everything. We're not necessarily involved in preventative measures. That would be more of a state regulatory or federal regulatory program. We're dealing with what we have at the moment. And I think that's where we're trying to go at the moment. So appreciate those concepts, but I think that we have to deal with the bag that we have been dealt.
Yeah, but I think that you are, in a sense, you still are investing in these, like the recycling partnerships, because you're granting them money, state-funded money, so they can continue. You know, you see what I'm saying?
No, I really don't, because the recycling partnership is spending the money to help reduce contamination. So wherever they get their funds from, we're actually using their funds, because there were some matching funds involved as well. Their time and effort was paid for by those corporations to reduce contamination. Now, whether or not you agree with why the contamination happened or anything like that, that's neither here nor there. But the program in and of itself was done for a specific purpose that had a huge investment in our state. And continuation of the program, because right, wrong, or indifferent, the stream that's been in place is there, and we have to deal with it. That's what the EPA is challenged with. It's what we as a group are challenged with, is deal with the cards that were dealt. And if somebody wants to influence those cards, that's great, and we look forward to that and encourage that. But our cards are done, and we have to deal with that as a group. So that's where we're at the moment. So The recycling partnership, while disagree with their funding, it is what it is. But we're using their funds to fix our problems, not helping them to continue creating the problem. So I appreciate the comments, though. So as we move forward, I think we have nothing else on the agenda. Is there anything else that we need to talk about? Okay.
Only if people have things they'd like to see on the next agenda. We may have more progress on the MAP grant subcommittee, but and potentially some information on what kind of film plastics are recyclable. But if there's other topics that people are interested in, let us know, because we're always looking for making sure that we make the agenda as relevant to what you want as possible.
Ernie, just as a heads up, if we can reach out to ODNR and ODOT and see if they can, somebody talk to us about the program that they're trying to do and see how we can assist with that.
Yeah, and Mr. Chairman, we'll have a conversation with DEFA and Heidi regarding what the plans are that they have for that project that they've undertaken with the other two state agencies. So we'll try to get everybody on the same page regarding that.
I think there's a lot of people here that can support that program in ways that we may not even know that exist yet.
Ernie, you have a question.
Oh, sorry. Kevin has his hand up.
Yes, so thank you. I did want to point out one resource that we have been doing since December. I know I was going to speak on this at our last meeting, but we kind of ran out of time. So we have actually been doing a quote unquote recycle right campaign through our social media accounts, trying to push universal statewide recycling information. Obviously, we know this is very difficult, but Michael, this goes to what you were referencing, which is like a clearinghouse for Ohio EPA. So we have been trying to work internally on an effort to create some sort of website resources in this regard. I know right now we've only been approved to do our social media campaign, but this is something we are strongly pushing for on Ohio EPA's website. They're going through a whole new website redesign right now that should be released at the end of the year. So I know right now it's kind of going slow in terms of if we can provide this in terms of a clearinghouse on a specific page, but we are looking into this for you guys as well.
Awesome. Okay. Well, hearing no other comments, we are 12 minutes short of our allotted time. I like it. If we're done, I need a motion to adjourn.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we adjourn.
First.
This is Marcy. I'll second.
Second. All opposed? Hearing none, it's lunchtime. Thank you very much for everybody's time today on this beautiful day. Have a great one, and we will see you in 2 months.
Thank you.
I'll send out meeting invites for the rest of the year.
Thank you, Ernie.